हरिः ओम् नमः सर्वेभ्यः। अष्टाध्यायी परिचयः इत्यस्य अद्य 20 पाठः। अद्य विधिसूत्रेषु उत्सर्गापवादसम्बन्धः कथं प्रवर्तते इत्यस्मिन् विषये किञ्चित् पठामः। शुक्लाम्बरधरं विष्णुं शशिवर्णं चतुर्भुजं प्रसन्नवदनं ध्यायेत् सर्वविघ्नोपशान्तये। येनाक्षरसमाम्नायमधिगम्य महेश्वरात् कृत्स्नं व्याकरणं प्रोक्तं तस्मै पाणिनये नमः। वाक्यकारं वररुचिं भाष्यकारं पतञ्जलिं पाणिनिं सूत्रकारं च प्रणतोऽस्मि मुनित्रयम्। अस्माकं वर्गस्य द्वे प्रयोजने अष्टाध्याय्याः आहत्य 400 सूत्राणां व्याख्यासहितम् उदाहरणसहितं च अध्ययनं, तथा च अष्टाध्याय्याः प्रथमाध्यायस्य प्रथमपादस्य कण्ठस्थीकरणम्। पूर्वस्मिन् वर्गे अस्माभिः विधिसूत्राणाम् एकवाक्यता कथं भवति इत्यस्मिन् विषये विस्तरेण चर्चा कृता। तत्र विधिसूत्रस्य सन्दर्भेण आदौ अनुवृत्तिः, मण्डूकप्लुतिः, अपकर्षः, अधिकारः इत्येते ये सर्वे विषयाः वर्तन्ते तेषां तस्मिन् सूत्रे ग्रहणं कृत्वा तदनन्तरं तस्मिन् सूत्रे याः संज्ञाः परिभाषाः च आवश्यक्यः तासां सर्वासाम् अपि तत्र ग्रहणं कृत्वा तदनन्तरं तस्य सूत्रस्य सन्दर्भेण नियमः, निषेधः, विभाषा यत्किमपि उक्तमस्ति तस्य अपि तस्मिन् सूत्रे समग्ररूपेण ग्रहणं क्रियते चेत् यद् बृहद्वाक्यं सिद्ध्यति सा पद्धतिः इत्युक्ते तस्य बृहद्वाक्यस्य निर्माणपद्धतिः एकवाक्यता नाम्ना ज्ञायते इति अस्माभिः पूर्वस्मिन् वर्गे अधीतम्। एतादृशी एकवाक्यता क्रियते इत्युक्ते बृहद्वाक्यं तत्र सूत्रस्य अर्थरूपेण निर्मीयते चेत् तस्य वाक्यस्य अपि अर्थं ज्ञातुं तस्मिन् वाक्ये विद्यमानाः उद्देश्यविधेयविषयाः तदनन्तरं ज्ञातव्याः इति अस्माभिः उदाहरणैः सह दृष्टम्। तत्र उद्देश्यस्य पूर्वनिमित्तं, परनिमित्तं, स्थानी, आगमी इति प्रकाराः अधीताः। विधेयस्य अपि प्रत्ययः, आदेशः, आगमः, लोपः, द्वित्वम् इति सर्वे प्रकाराः अस्माभिः दृष्टाः। तदनन्तरं वर्गस्य अन्ते अनेन उद्देश्येन तथा च अनेन विधेयेन अपि सवर्णग्रहणं भवति वा, भवति चेत् कस्याम् अवस्थायां भवति इति सर्वम् अस्माभिः दृष्टम्. So this particular topic of Savarna Grahanam that we discussed at the end of yesterday's class, I listened to that recording again and I thought that there were a few points which I wanted to elaborate in a more detailed manner, which I did not, which I forgot, or which I couldn't elaborate in the flow of my statements. So, in the initial few minutes of today's class, I want to go over this particular concept of Savarna Grahanam. Nothing new is being taught, but I want to clarify a few things which I assumed. Because when you teach, you somehow end up assuming something which you should not. And I ended up assuming something, and then I thought that might have caused some kind of confusion. So let me just clarify this right from the basics. So, what is a Savarna Grahanam? Carrying other Savarnas along with a letter is called Savarna Grahanam. So, for example, Rasva, Udatta, Ananunasika, has 17 Savarnas. So, when you take that the 17 Savarnas come along with it, like the engine of a train brings all the compartments. That's the process which we refer to as Savarna Grahanam. Now, for our course and for our discussion in general, even in Laghu Siddhanta Kaumudi or Siddhanta Kaumudi, in general, when you discuss these aspects of Savarna Grahanam in Vyakarana Shastra, you leave out the Udatta, Anudatta, and Swarita Bheda. Leave out in the sense you don't think about them, and you don't think about the Anunasika and Niranunasika Bheda, at least in our class for simplicity. So when we are talking about the concept of Savarna Grahanam in this course specifically, we are only going to mention the Kalakruta Bhedas, which is essentially Raswa, Dirgha and Pluta. So now instead of a train having 18 compartments or say one engine and then 17 compartments, we are now going to have a very small train which has only 3 compartments. The first being an engine, and then there is a Dirgha and then there is a Pluta. What happens to Udatta, Anudatta, Swarita? You consider them as part of that Akara only. So when you say A, it is basically all Udatta, Anudatta, Swarita plus Anunasika, Ananunasika. Same for A and Pluta A. Even over there, specifically Pluta will not be used. But we don't want to just drop it out. So we will continue to use all the 3 Kala Kruta Bhedas. Now, with this particular assumption, with this particular understanding, how will we define Savarna Grahanam? So, for A, E, U, and Ru, there are 3 Vedas. So, the first of them will capture the remaining 2. So, Rasva Bhedena Dirghasya Plutasya Cha Grahanam. Again, let me repeat, the name Pluta is written purely for theoretical purposes. Mainly it is Rasvena Dirghasya Granam. But let's use that particular, all the 3 Vedas in our discussion. So, Rasva Bhedena Dirghasya Plutasya Cha Grahanam. This is the Savarna Grahanam for A, E, U and Ru. For Lu, there is no Dirgha Bheda, so it is a train only with 2 compartments, an engine and a compartment. So basically, Rasva Bhedena Plutasya Grahanam. And for A, I, O, this is the thing that I completely missed mentioning in the previous class. I just assume that you will understand it. But this is what I want to elaborate. Because there is no Rasva Bheda, it is the Dirgha Bheda that is going to do the Savarna Grahanam of Pluta. So Dirgha Bhedena Plutasya Grahanam. So we have these in sequence, Rasva, Dirgha and Pluta, and whosoever is the first one is the engine and is going to carry the entire compartments along with it. So that is Savarna Grahanam. And now this Savarna Grahanam is blocked by using that particular ta, which can either be present after or it can be present before. So again, I wrote it after or before in the yesterday's class. I also mentioned it, but I did not stress it. So here is the example. You can either say a t or you can say ta a. It can either come before or it can come after. And whenever that ta is present, the ta entity is going to block this train engine carrying the compartments. So Savarna Grahanam is going to be blocked. Technically, we don't say Savarna Grahanasya Nishedha Krutaha. We say Savarna Grahanasya Niyamanam Krutam for some reasons that I don't want to talk right now. But let's use the correct terms. Atra Savarna Grahanasya Niyamanam Bhavati Ityukte Atta, Itta, Utta and Rutta. So understand, it was just when it was just A, I, Uru, Rasva Bhedena Dirgha Plutayoho Grahanam Bhavati. But when it is Atta, Itta, Utta and Rutta, Rasva Bhedena Dirgha Plutayoho Grahanam na Bhavati. And Dirgha Bhedasya Pluta Bhedasya cha Tapara Karanam eva na Sambhavati. So if you say At, that T is not to be considered linked with A. That T is something completely separate. It might have a separate functionality. We will learn it at some point in time in the course. But At or even A, Pluta, T is not considered a single unit for interpreting the Savarna properties. Whereas Atta is considered a single unit for interpreting the Savarna properties, and this will say the Rasva Bheda will not include the Dirgha and Pluta. Now what happens to Lutta? Rasva Bhedena Plutasya Grahanam na bhavati. Now because there is no Dirgha in the picture, Rasva blocks the Grahana of Pluta, and the same thing Pluta Bhedasya Taparakaranam na sambhavati. And finally, Et, Ait, Ot, Out. This is again something I missed explaining in the yesterday's class. Dirgha Bhedena Plutasya Grahanam na bhavati. So because the leader, the engine over there is the Dirgha, that Dirgha will get a Ta. So observe the striking difference. In Eta, it is the Taparakaranam done on Dirgha because Rasva is not available. In Atta, it is a taparakaranam done on Rasva because the Rasva Bheda is available. So whosoever is the first in the list, on that the Savarna Grahanam has to be done. So eta, aita, ota, auta, atra dirgha bhedena plutasya grahanam na bhavati, and similarly pluta bhedasya taparakaranam na sambhavati. So except for that engine, the other compartments cannot act as engine. So you cannot add a ta on the other compartments. So as I mentioned, nothing mentioned on this slide is contradicting what we saw yesterday. It's just adding more light to it. It's giving more elaboration, more examples. Now at this point in time, I want to take questions on anything that we discussed yesterday. Let it be ekavakyata, let it be savarna granam, let it be uddesha vidheya. If there are no questions, then we will go to the discussion that we want to do today, which is essentially once you have this ekavakyata and once you have identified uddesham and vidheyam and once you know the exact meaning of the sutram, the question is, will this sutram actually act now? Because there are many such sutrams that might simultaneously be present at that particular step in the prakriya, and will that particular sutram act or will it get blocked by something else? So mutual relationship between the sutras is the topic of today's discussion. But before that, let me have the questions. Anjali Bhagini.
Namaste, Mahoday.
Namaste.
At is used for blocking a.
Correct.
So a only is not used anywhere, right? It is not required, va?
When only a is required, you can just say a. Right?
Okay.
Correct. So,
So
Ashtana
a doesn't
avibhaktau.
carry
So
a.
let's go to the sutra. Ashtana avibhaktau. So there is akaradesha. Now, when you explicitly want to say akaradesha, you use the word a because then it will give akaradesha.
But then like a carries all 17, 18 Bhedaha. Like that a doesn't carry, is it?
Correct. That's exactly what I said. The first in the list carries everybody else. So when you have Raswa Dirgha Pluta, the Raswa is the leader, it is the engine, it will carry everybody else. If you don't have Raswa, like for example A, I, O, O, there is no Raswa. So Dirgha automatically becomes the engine and Dirgha will now carry the Pluta. That's all that you have to understand. Clear?
Thank you.
Anything else? So Savarna Grahanam is always by the first in the series, and the series consists of only 3 entities. We are ignoring Udatta, Anudatta and so on. So series consists of only 3 entities, Rasva, Dirgha and Pluta. In the same order, the first one will do the Savarna Grahanam. So again, there is a question over here. If you just want to use a, will we say at? Please understand, again, you have not understood this. There is no need to say at because purpose of ta is to block Savarna Grahanam or to control the Savarna Grahanam. And there is no Savarna Grahanam happening by a. So at is, that ta is redundant sitting next to a. So for writing Dirgha letters, when a Rasva Bharjan is present, there is no Taparakaranam needed. That's exactly what is written over here. Dirgha bhedasya pluta bhedasya cha taparakaranam na sambhavati. You cannot do the taparakaranam on the dirgha and the pluta bheda when the rasva is present. Any other raised hands? There is a question. Savarna Sutra is different from Savarna Grahana Sutra. So Savarna means Tulyasya Prayatnam Savarnam, which will define the Savarna Samnya. So Yayoho Varnayoho Abhyantara Prayatnaha Uchcharana Sthanam cha Samanam Asti. They are Savarna. So that's the definition. So Savarna Samnya Sutram is a sutram that will give the Savarna Samnya. That is some completely different. We are talking about Savarna Grahanam. Now there is a separate sutram for Savarna Grahanam and there is a separate sutram for Savarna Samnya. We will talk about, there is one full class that will be taken, like class number 36, 26 or 25 something. Full class will be taken on Savarnas and lots of questions related to that will be clarified. त इत्यस्य उदाहरणस्य विषये किञ्चित् वदतु. So where is that त so it can be either a t or it can be t a. This is just a hypothetical example. You don't actually, at least I don't know if whether I can't recollect if you can see t a, but you can actually see other swaras. So for example, if you go to the very first sutram of Ashtadhyayi, Vruddhiradaich, or let's say Adeng Gunaha, either of them is okay. But if you say At-eng Gunaha, see the breakup of the first word, it is A-ta-e. And this central ta acts as a tapara karnam for the previous a, and it acts as a tapara karnam for the next a. So it is ta doing the tapara karnam of a, and ta-e doing the tapara karnam on a. So we will talk about this when we learn Adeng Guna Sutra, probably 2 classes later. For now, this much is sufficient. Now there is a question, Hrasva Dirghakarayoha Abhyanta Prayatno Bhinnao. That has nothing to do over here. Basically, the rule says that normal a will do Savarna Grahanam and a followed by ta. Same is for e, u, ru. So it has nothing to do with whether the Abhyanta Prayatnas are same or different. Reshma Kaleji.
Namaste, Mahoday. One question about yesterday's class, like there are 5 types of vidheyam. So for the pratyaya vidheyam in particular, so what will be the sthani be? Because it is maybe the pratyaya is for some pratipadik or some dhatu. So what kind of sthani will it be?
So for pratyaya will not have a sthani because a pratyaya is added to an empty place after the prakriti. So the prakriti is the purva nimitta, which will be given by panchami vibhakti, and then in the empty space the pratyaya will be added. So technically you don't need a sthani when a pratyaya is being attached.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Chandramouli Mahoday.
Yesterday in one of the sutras you had given in the assignment, I had a quick question. There was a adhikara called Purvatra Siddham, Jhalan Jhashi. So when you do Ekavakyata, how do you introduce this word in the Ekavakyata?
Correct. So the even yesterday's example Sanyoganta Silopa that I took has Purvatra Siddham. We don't have enough machinery to answer that question. So I purposely omitted that word in the example. You can omit that adhikara. In fact, you can omit all adhikaras in the assignment. If you look at yesterday's assignment, I explicitly wrote Anuvritti Sahitam Sutram. So you can omit all adhikaras from the homework.
Oh, okay. Got it. Okay, thanks.
And I would have loved to answer, but we don't have enough background. We need to know what asiddhatva is clearly before we can answer that question. Vidya Bhagini.
तत्र नदीनाम् इत्यत्र आमि इत्यस्य आदेशः भवति वा? तत् पूर्वं नदी इति अस्ति, तदनन्तरं तत्र उद्देश्यं न दृश्यते किल तत्र सूत्रे?
सर्वदा सूत्रे दृश्येत इति नास्ति किल, अनुवृत्तिरूपेण अपि आगन्तुं शक्नोति. So you
परन्तु
have to
तत्र तु अङ्गस्य इत्येव अस्ति, अङ्गस्य
so angasya, in that particular case where you cannot see anything, you can take that particular word angasya. That's okay. That's not a really big deal. Only when you have confusion about anuvrittis, adhikaras, or adhikaras are not being clear, not needed, you can just ignore them. In 1 or 2 examples when they just the word angasya is there, you can use it.
अस्तु, धन्यवादः.
ASR Murthy Mahoday.
Purvatra Siddham means, is it Purvatra Siddham or Purvatra Siddham?
It's Purvatra plus Asiddham.
Asiddham. Okay.
Anything else? Oh, you want to ask something else as well? You have other question? No. Okay. Okay. Agre gacchamaha. So now that we have these particular Vidhi Sutras fully expanded, and we know that this is an Uddesha, this is a Vidheya, and so on, the immediate next question that comes up is that at particular step in the Prakriya, if there are multiple sutras coming simultaneously acting, what happens? So Prakriyayaha prayena pratyekasmin eva sopane द्वयोः अथवा अधिकानां विधिसूत्राणां प्राप्तिः संभवति. In fact, when you learn prakriyas more and more, you will see that you cannot find a prakriya where there is no conflict between sutras. So even the most trivialist prakriya like Ramaha, each step has 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, 15 sutras coming together. More and more sutras you will learn, you will understand that all these come together. When you learn only using Lagu Siddhanta Kaumudi or Siddhanta Kaumudi in that particular sequence, you are just learning Ramaha, your teacher tells you that this is a sutra that comes and you blindly accept it. But when you have the complete knowledge, you will see it's actually a very beautiful exercise to actually sit down and work out which all sutras will come at that particular place. And at some point in time in the course, when we have enough machinery built, I would definitely love all of us to do that particular exercise. But for now, just take my words for it. प्रत्येकस्मिन् सोपाने द्वयोः अथवा अधिकानां विधिसूत्राणां प्राप्तिः संभवति. And the important word in this statement is prapti. Prapti is ability to act. अन्ते एकस्यैव सूत्रस्य प्रयोगः कर्तुं शक्यते. अस्यां स्थितौ कस्य सूत्रस्य अन्ते प्रसक्तिः भवति. Compare and contrast this word. Prapti is the word used to indicate eligibility of a sutra. Prasakti is the word used to indicate an actual application of the sutra. So multiple, like for example, multiple candidates come for the interview. So that's prapti. The final offer is extended only to one candidate. That's prasakti. So asyam sthitau kasya sutrasya ante prasaktihi bhavati. Tat jnatum तयोः सूत्रयोः नो चेत् तेषां सूत्राणां मध्ये कीदृशः सम्बन्धः अस्ति, कीदृशं बलीयस्त्वम् अस्ति. So the fight happens between the sutras, which wins, which loses, all that shastra needs to be understood. And this badhya badhaka bhava, basically who is the blocker and who gets blocked, is one of the most beautiful and extremely complex topics in Paniniya Vyakarana. So अस्य सम्बन्धस्य एव आधारेण इत्युक्ते सूत्रेषु विद्यमानस्य बलाबलीयत्वस्य आधारेण किं सूत्रं बाधकं. Badhakam is blocker, the one who blocks others. Kim cha badhyam, the one that gets suppressed, the one that gets blocked. Iti nirnayaha bhavati. So you evaluate the relative fight or importance of two sutras, and for two sutras it may be easy, but like a group of say 5, 6, 7 sutras, you evaluate them mutually, you understand who will the final winner be, and you select that. And when you try to put some structure around the relationship between the two sutras, like what kind of fight or what kind of conflict might exist between the sutras, you can see सूत्रेषु विद्यमानः परस्परसम्बन्धः मुख्यरूपेण पञ्चविधः अस्ति. This particular conflict can be described or divided into 5 major buckets, each of which is being handled separately in Vyakarana Shastra. Utsargapavatvam, Antaranga Bahirangatvam. So basically you see these are names that come in pair. So one will be called Utsarga, other will be called Apavada. So Utsarga Apavada. One will be called Antaranga, other will be called Bahiranga. One and other means those which are fighting. Two sutras are fighting, one will be called Antaranga, other will be called Bahiranga. So Antaranga Bahirangatvam. Nitya Nityatvam. One will be called Nitya, other will be called Anitya. Vipratishedatvam. One is called Purva, other is called Para, and the fight between them is called Vipratishedha. And Asiddhatvam. One may be Siddha, other may be Asiddha, or both may be Asiddha. So that is Asiddhatvam. Really complex topics. I do not expect you to understand even the names. I just wanted to present the depth of this particular topic. So 5 different types of conflicts might exist. Utsargapavada, Antaranga Bahiranga, Nityanityatvam, Vipratishedham, and Asiddhatvam. Out of these, Antaranga Bahirangatvam is pretty complex. We will most likely not require it in our course. Once in a while, maybe at some point in time, if by hook or fluke, whatever crook it comes up, I'll explain that. But otherwise, Antaranga Bahirangatva is out of the scope of this course. Nitya Nityatvam is out of the scope of this course. The remaining 3 we will study. Utsargapavada we are going to study. Vipratishedha we are going to study. Asiddhatva we are going to study. In fact, we are going to take one full class on each of them. And out of that, today's class is for Utsargapawadatvam. So adya asmabhihi kevalam Utsargapawadatvam iti vishayaha pathaniyah. Then in class number 29, so the next module, last two classes, class number 29 and class number 30, the last two classes of our next module, I am going to take one class on Vipratishedha and one class on Asiddhatva. So this way we will build the background of Utsarga Apavada, Vipratishedha and Asiddhatva before we actually enter the discussion of Sandhis and Subantas and Tingantas and so on. And we will not discuss the Antaranga, Bahiranga and Nitya Nityatva in this course unless it is really required at some remote place. So let's start with Utsargapavada. What is Utsargapavada? Most of you probably have heard these words. Utsarga is Samanya Vidhihi. Apavada is Vishesha Vidhihi. Let us understand one very fundamental thing before we move ahead. Apavada is not exception. There is no translation of Apavada which will say exception. Utsarga is the general rule. Apavada is a special rule, not an exception. What is an exception? I'll talk about it later on, but this is the most fundamental thing everybody, all beginner students have full confusion about. They believe that when it is Utsarga and Apavada is exception, it will take up. No, that's not how it is defined. Utsarga is Samanya Vidhi. For example, all students go to library. That's a general statement. Devadatta goes to the music room. That's a special statement. That's a Vishesha Vidhi. So Utsarga is the Samanya Vidhi. Apavad is the Vishesha Vidhi. And when you say Vishesha, this word is in the context of that Samanya. So Vishesha kasya sandarbhena Visheshaha, Samanyasya sandarbhena Visheshaha. So अपवादस्य कार्यक्षेत्रम उत्सर्गस्य कार्यक्षेत्रस्य अंशमात्रम वर्तते. When the teacher says all students go to library, the karyakshetra of that particular instruction is all students. And in the next instruction, the teacher says Devadatta goes to the music room. Devadatta is a small component of that karyakshetram on which a special rule is being told. So apavadasya karyakshetram उत्सर्गस्य कार्यक्षेत्रस्य अपेक्षया अंशमात्रं वर्तते. कः अर्थः? यत्र यत्र अपवादस्य प्राप्तिः अस्ति तत्र तत्र सर्वत्र उत्सर्गस्य प्राप्तिः अस्ति. So apavada is for Devadatta. Utsarga is also applicable to Devadatta. So when an apavada is applicable, Utsarga will always be applicable. But reverse is not true. उत्सर्गस्य प्राप्तिः वर्गे विद्यमानानाम् अन्येषां छात्राणां कृते अपि अस्ति. अपवादस्य तत्र प्राप्तिः न भवति. And therefore, apavada does not have its own separate place of acting outside the utsarga. So apavadasya swasya pruthak karyakshetram nasti. This is the typical Venn diagram where one circle is inside the other circle. So utsargasya karyakshetram is indicated by the white color. The apavadasya karyakshetram is indicated by the gray color. And therefore, the fundamental definition says niravakashatvam. Avakasha means space. Not having the space outside the outer circle. So the apavada is strongly embedded in that outer circle. Not having any space outside that outer circle is the definition of apavada. Niravakashatvam apavadasya bijam. Bija is the seed, is the very, very fundamental requirement of being an apavada, is having an outer layer inside which something is embedded. So niravakashatvam apavadasya bijam. Vidyaji.
विपरीतं दृश्यते. तत्र यत्र यत्र उत्सर्गस्य कार्यक्षेत्रमस्ति अपवादस्य अपि तत्र कार्यं भवितुमर्हति, परन्तु तस्य कृते नूतनतया किमपि उक्तमस्ति.
No, when you say all students go to library, that's the utsarga. And when you say Devadatta goes to music room, this apavada is not applicable for Yajnadatta.
परन्तु
So they-
but this it is it's given as yatra yatra apavadasya praptihi asti. Shouldn't that be
हाँ,
yatra yatra utsargasya praptihi asti
यत्र यत्र अपवादस्य प्राप्तिः अस्ति, अपवादस्य प्राप्तिः कस्य कृते? देवदत्तस्य कृते अस्ति। तत्र तत्र उत्सर्गस्य प्राप्तिः अस्ति, परंतु यत्र यत्र उत्सर्गस्य प्राप्तिः अस्ति, उत्सर्ग इज एप्लीकेबल फॉर देवदत्त, सोमदत्त, यज्ञदत्त, विष्णुदत्त, बट तत्र तत्र अपवादस्य प्राप्तिः नास्ति। क्लियर? अंडरस्टैंड दिस वेरी केयरफुली दैट अपवादस्य प्राप्तिः कुत्र अस्ति? इन द ग्रे सर्कल अपवादस्य प्राप्तिः अस्ति। यत्र यत्र अपवादस्य प्राप्तिः अस्ति तत्र तत्र सर्वत्र व्हाइट सर्कल अस्ति किल, अतः उत्सर्गस्य अपि प्राप्तिः अस्ति। परंतु यत्र यत्र उत्सर्गस्य प्राप्तिः अस्ति, द एक्सटर्नल पार्ट ऑफ द व्हाइट सर्कल, तत्र तत्र अपवादस्य प्राप्तिः नास्ति।
If you say that, Madhya, that then where whatever is applicable to Devadatta is also applicable to students, iti
No, but
avagamyate.
that's not correct. What is applicable to Devadatta is apavada. It is not applicable to Utsarga at all. Somebody is using the terms general and particular. That's exactly what we are saying. General statement is all students. Particular statement is Devadatta. What is applicable to Devadatta is not applicable to everybody else. But what is applicable to everybody else is applicable to Devadatta.
Praptihi nama applicability kile. Praptihi nama applicability.
Applicability. That's what is on the previous slide I explained, right? Prasaktihi ityukte immediate application bhavati. Prapti ityukte bhavitum arhati. Clear? Not clear?
No, Madhya, maybe it will take time.
Okay.
It feels the reverse to me. That's why I'm not able
Okay,
to
maybe after the next slide it will be clear. Just hold on.
Astu, धन्यवादः महोदय.
Chandramouli Mahoday. Chandramouli Mahoday.
Sir, my point is Utsargaha as a word itself means something that is sacrificed or some space ceded, right?
Some that has come out as a general statement. That's what it means. Utsarga comes out as a general. Utsrujyate.
Okay.
That word doesn't have any...
sacrificing something.
No, not sacrificing. Some oozing out or some coming out, I think. Utsrujyate. It gets generated. Iti artha.
Okay. Okay.
Krishna Kumar Mahoday.
Namaste, Mahodaya. So my question is, first you say all students go to library and Devadatta go to music room or whatever. Now, if I reverse that, first I say Devadatta, then I say all students, how does that impact comes?
It doesn't matter, right? Apavada is still an apavada because you see, compare it with the circles. Devadatta is a part of the class. So one instruction, whether it's first or second, doesn't matter. One instruction is applicable only to one member of the class. Other instruction is applicable to 50 members of the class. So an instruction that is applicable to 50 members of the class is the Utsarga. Instruction that is applicable to one member of the class is Apavada. That's how it works. Where it is present is altogether like completely irrelevant. We are going to talk about that in next few slides. A lot of material has to be covered, so let's actually go ahead. So now that I very clearly mentioned that Apavada is not an exception, but it turns out that if Apavada is not an exception, why is Apavada going to block Utsarga? So obviously, I mean, when you say all students go to library and Devadatta goes to the music room, Devadatta doesn't go to the library, Devadatta goes to music room. So whatever words you use, Utsarga or Apavada, the result is that the sutram that is a special case is eventually going to block the one that has a general case. So samanya rupena apavada sutram utsargasya badhaka rupena pravartate. So here is the word badhaka is exception. So do not think apavada is exception. Apavada is a special rule. Utsarga is a general rule. And badhaka is the exception or the blocker. And that apavada is going to block the utsarga in most of the cases. So we say samanya rupena apavada sutram utsargasya badhaka rupena pravartate. And this is captured by a formal definition. Yena na prapte yo vidhirarabhyate satasya badhako bhavati. What does it mean? I'm going to dissect every word. Let's read this. येन ना प्राप्ते यो विधिः आरभ्यते स तस्य बाधको भवति। येन इत्युक्ते येन उत्सर्गेण, ना प्राप्ते इत्युक्ते न अप्राप्ते, negation of negation, अवश्यम प्राप्ते. So the white circle will always be there. येन उत्सर्गेण अवश्यम प्राप्ते यह विधिः इत्युक्ते यह अपवादः, यह विधिः आरभ्यते इत्युक्ते विशेष रूपेण उक्तः अस्ति. So given the white circle, the gray circle is explicitly being told येन उत्सर्गेण अवश्यं प्राप्ते अपवादः उक्तः अस्ति, सः अपवादः तस्य उत्सर्गस्य बाधकः भवति. So अपवादः उत्सर्गस्य बाधं कृत्वा प्रवर्तते. So the white circle is उत्सर्ग. उत्सर्गेण अवश्यं प्राप्ते अपवादः प्रारभ्यते. So all students should go to music room. That fundamental statement is there, and on the top of that, top means it can be before or after, but in the context of that, Devadatta goes to music room has been told. So somebody is asking over here, Apavada Sutram is applicable only when Utsarga is applicable. That's actually evident directly from this diagram. Apavada is the gray circle. It will be applicable only when the white circle is applicable. So येन ना प्राप्ते इत्युक्ते येन उत्सर्गेण अवश्यं प्राप्ते यः विधिः, यः अपवादः उक्तः अस्ति, सः अपवादः उत्सर्गस्य बाधं कृत्वा प्रवर्तते. So यत्र यत्र उत्सर्गः तथा अपवादः द्वयोः अपि प्राप्तिः वर्तते, which is basically this gray circle. There is also a white component in that. The software limitation, I cannot show it, but there is a white component in that. So it is an overlap of white and gray. So yatra yatra utsargaha tatha apavadaha dvayoho api praptihi vartate. Praptihi, see the word. Tatra tatra samanya rupena utsargam badhitva apavadaha eva pravartate iti niyamaha. This is being captured by yena na prapte yo vidhirarabhyate satasya badhako bhavati. And obviously grammar cannot be that simple if it would have been only this rule. So asya niyamasya api apavadaha santi. There are exceptions of this rule itself. So there are quite complex statements. Kvachid apavada vishaye api utsargaha abhinivishate. In some cases, the utsarga will block the apavada. So utsarga acts as an exception on the apavada. पूर्वं हि अपवादाः अभिनिविशन्ते पश्चादुत्सर्गाः. In some remote prakriyas, some complex prakriyas, first apavada will come and then utsarga will come. So apavada is not blocking the utsarga. Apavada is just saying, let me go first, like a door. So let me go through that door and the door is now empty, you can go. So purvam apavadaha abhinivishate tadanantaram utsargaha. Sometimes the apavada blocks the utsarga by vikalpa. So there says, let's do two branches of the prakriya. In one branch, apavada will come. In one branch, utsarga will come. So really complex cases are there. Some of these cases, for example, the last one, apavada utsargasya va badhaka bhavati, we will learn it all the way towards the end of the course in class number 100 or so, where we discuss krudanta prakaranam. But for the kvachid apavada vishay utsargaha and purvam hi apavadaha pashad utsargaha, we will not talk about in this course at all. But for now, at least we are just in class number 20. For right now, we do not need to worry about any of these special cases. For now, it is perfectly okay to assume yena na prapte yo vidhirarabhyate satasya badhako bhavati, which means an apavada will always block the utsarga. But the reason why we cannot outrightly call apavada as exception is because of these corner cases where even the utsarga might come as an exception over the apavada. Now all this is theory, so let's actually go to examples and then you will understand some of the confusion might get clarified. So let's actually take some sutras. There is a sutram called Swamor Napumsakat. I am not teaching any sutras, you don't need to know any meaning except for what I am teaching. So Napumsakalinga Shabdat Vihitasya Prathama Ekavachanasya Supratyayasya Lopaha Bhavati. So that's the statement. I'm not telling which is Utsarga and which is Apavada. Let's first see two sutras. You will yourself find out which is Utsarga and which is Apavada. So नपुंसकलिंग शब्दात विहितस्य, let's take वारी, which is napumsakalinga. At the prathama ekvachana su pratyaya, it undergoes a lopa. That's the swamor napumsakat sutra. So vari plus su, lopa happens vari. Similarly, tada, napumsakalinga, plus su, lopa happens tada. So like that, the su lopa is happening. The karya kshetra of this particular sutram, swamor napumsakat, is all napumsakalinga words, sarve napumsakalinga shabdaha and supratyaya. It is not applicable for other pratyas like tabhyam, bhis and so on, only supratyaya. This is not applicable to pullinga and strilinga, only napumsakalinga. So that's the karya kshetram of swamor napumsakat. The next sutram, immediately next one in the sequence, says atom, which says ह्रस्व अकारांत नपुंसकलिंग शब्दात् विहितस्य प्रथमा एकवचनस्य सुप्रत्ययस्य अम आदेशः भवति. So if you take a ह्रस्व अकारांत पुल्लिंग napumsakalinga word like phala, then this particular supratyaya undergoes an adesha. Su gets converted to ama. So phala plus ama, some prakriya happens, and phalam is the prathama ekvachanam that is formed. So now what is the karya kshetram for atom? It is the ह्रस्व akaramta napumsakalinga shabdaha and supratyaya. Now you can clearly see that atom ityasya karya kshetram swamor napumsakat ityasya karya kshetrasya amshamatram vartate. Swamor napumsakat is for all napumsakalinga shabda and supratyaya. Atom is for ह्रस्व अकारांत नपुंसकलिंग शब्द and supratyaya. So swamor napumsakat ityasya कार्यक्षेत्रस्य अपेक्षया atom ityasya कार्यक्षेत्रम अंशमात्रम vartate. So you say swamor napumsakat is the utsarga, the outer white circle, and atom is the apavada, the inner gray circle. So here is an application. So for swamor napumsakat 7.123, vari plus su will be vari. Tada plus su will be tada. And it will also say phala plus su. Let's make it phala is what it is going to say. But immediately atom is going to come and atom is going to say, no, phala plus su is phalam. It is blocking that particular utsarga. So understand, the utsarga karya kshetra is wide enough to include phala plus su is equal to phala. So येन ना प्राप्ते इत्युक्ते येन उत्सर्गेण अवश्यम प्राप्ते. Utsarga is indeed applicable for phala plus su because utsarga is for all types of napumsakalinga words. So येन अवश्यम प्राप्ते यो vidhi arabhyate satasya badhako bhavati. So that new vidhi which is coming, which is adesha, is going to block the particular utsarga. So utsarga is swamor napumsakat, atom is the apavada, and apavada is blocking the utsarga. Let's take another example. This is a little bit more complex example. Actually, we are going to keep on doing more and more complex examples towards the end of the class. So this is yet another complex example. Now what happens is that in some cases, you will see that one sutram is not fully inside the other sutram. So it is not like a very trivial white circle outside and a gray circle inside, but one part of that sutram becomes niravakasha. So one small component of the sutram becomes niravakasha. Understand this with an example and then it will become clear. So there is a sutram in the Kridanta Prakaranam called Achoyata. This sutram says Ajanta dhatuhu asti chet yata iti pratyayaha prayoktavyaha. For some context, you don't need to worry about the context. So Ajanta dhatu, say for example, ni iti dhatuhu asti, tatra yata iti pratyayaha prayoktavyaha. So ni plus yata will become neya. Pa plus yata will become peya. Bhu plus yata will become bhavya. So ajantaha dhatuhu asti chet yata iti pratyayaha prayoktavyaha. This is one rule. The second rule says ruhalornyata. Rukaranta dhatuhu and halanta dhatuhu. Rukaranta dhatu like kru and halanta dhatu like patha. So rukaranta dhatuhu no chet halantaha dhatuhu asti chet niyat iti pratyayaha prayoktavyaha. So for example, kru plus णयत will become karya. Patha plus णयत will become pathya. Now observe these two sutras. Obviously, no sutra is inside another because the karya kshetra of achoyata is the ajanta verbs. The karya kshetra of ruhalornyata is rukaranta verbs and halanta verbs. So technically you cannot put these sutras with a white circle and a gray circle. But what is happening? One component of ruhalornyata, rukaranta entity, which is explicitly mentioned, ru, that is the special case of ajanta achoyata. So achoyata talks about all swaras and ruhalornyata talks about a specific type of swara called rukara. So ruhalornyata. So ruhalornyat iti sutrena ण्यत इति यः प्रत्ययः विधीयते सः रु इति अंशस्य संदर्भेण यत इति प्रत्ययस्य अपवादः अस्ति. So even though the hala component is giving something new, it is actually Panini's style to do alpaksharatvam. So technically this means there are two sutras, rukaranta dhatoho yata and halanta dhatoho yata. But just for doing alpaksharatvam, Panini compresses the two sutras. Ru and hala have no relation. Ru will still act as an apavada for achoyata. So ruhalornyata ityatra vidyamanasya hal iti amshasya yadyapi achoyata ityanena sah kopi sambandha nasti tathapi ru iti amshah achoyata ityasya upasthitau niravakashah bhavati. If you always start applying yata pratyaya even for rukaranta words because it is ajanta, then ru component will become niravakasha. It will not have a place to act separately outside achoyata. And remember, niravakashatvam apavadasya bijam. So asyam sthitau api ruhaloranyata iti sutram achoyata ityasya apavada rupena eva svikriyate. So even though it is not a strict white and gray inside it relationship, still at this particular moment, the rukara is going to act as an apavada for achoyata, and therefore achoyata will still continue to be the utsarga, ruhalornyata will continue to be apavada. Therefore, rukaranta dhatoho vishaye अचोयत इत्यनेन प्राप्तं यत् प्रत्ययं बाधित्वा रुहलोरण्यत इत्यनेन ण्यत् प्रत्ययः एव विधीयते. So there is a digressive question, there is a slight discussion over here. How do we get bhavya? There is a different sutram that will give that in a very specific different context. So we'll not go about that. The topic itself is pretty complex. So let's focus on the topic. Any particular questions on this? So somebody is asking, can there be two apavada sutras coming together and clashing? There can be many apavadas, but apavadas, when they clash and when you compare those two apavadas, one of them will be utsarga of another. So you have to compare two sutras at a time. X may be apavada of say sutra number A and Y may be apavada of sutra number A. But when you compare X and Y, you will have to find out whether there is apavada utsarga relation. And it is not necessary that any two random sutras will be utsarga and apavada. Utsarga apavada is just one mechanism. Remember, all the way in the beginning, we saw there are so many mechanisms. So two sutras may not be utsarga apavada. One of them may be antaranga bahiranga. One of them may be nitya anitya. One of them may be purva para and so on. So if there is utsarga apavada, this particular today's discussion is applicable. If there is vipratisheda, some other discussion. If there is asiddhatva, some other discussion. So first you have to understand what kind of sambandha it is. Assuming it is utsarga apavada sambandha, all the discussion in the today's class is going to make sense. Somebody is asking, what is balabalam? Balabalam is bala and a bala. So more powerful and less powerful. That's balabalam. Any particular questions? So let's go ahead. We have not even touched the tip of the iceberg. There's too much of this stuff in today's class. It's going to be somewhat complex, but just 3-4 more slides. Now, before we go ahead, there was this question asked by someone in one of the few classes, apavada versus niyama versus nishedha. So at that time, I gave an answer, but we hadn't learned the concept of apavada officially in the course. So let's again look at this particular question now that we have learned the topic of apavada. So what is the difference between apavada versus niyama versus nishedha? So अपवादः इत्युक्ते सामान्यविधेः उपस्थितौ विहितः विशेषविधिः. So swamor napumsakat is the samanya vidhi. In presence of that atom is the vishesha vidhi. So samanya vidhehe upasthitau vihitah vishesha vidhihi apavadaha namna jnayante. The niyama is vidhehe sankochanam. So you don't give a new vidhi. So Vishesha vidhi is not there at all. You don't give any new vidhi. You simply say vidhehe krutam sankochanam. So sanyogantasya lopaha ityasya रेफस्य विषये संकोचनं रात्सस्य तेन क्रियते रेफात् परस्य सकारस्यैव लोपः भवति नान्यस्य. So this is a niyama. So niyama will not give a vishesha vidhi. There is only one vidhi called samanya vidhi, and it is being compressed, its scope is being reduced. And nishedha again doesn't give vishesha vidhi, it simply outrightly blocks that vidhi. So nami is the vidhi which does the dirgha of shashti bahuvachana pratyaya in presence of shashti bahuvachana pratyaya. But for the words tisru and chatasru, that dirgha is not required. So the tisra chatasru will do the nishedha of nami. So niyama sutras and nishedha sutras do not give a vishesha vidhi. Apavada sutras give the vishesha vidhi. That's the difference between apavada, niyama and nishedha. Okay, I'll take a pause at the moment. Any particular questions, I'm happy to answer, because what comes next is even more confusing. Okay, no questions. Agre gacchamaha. Now, what I'm going to discuss is even a complex relationship between not just two sutras, but three sutras, which is still called as Utsarga Apavada. Please pay very close attention, because what happens is what we discussed earlier, a very beautiful diagram of white circle inside the white circle outside and the gray circle inside. This kind of Utsarga Apavada is only in sweet dreams. Only very few cases you will see this kind of Utsarga Apavada. The real Utsarga Apavada that you see in many sutras of Ashtadhyayi is the next one, the complex one that I am just going to introduce right now. So kutrachit ekam sutram, there is a question. Okay, so the question says, are the niyama, apavada and so on sutras are placed serially after the utsarga sutram? So in general, yes. So the general design of Ashtadhyayi will keep the utsarga first and then all the niyama, nishedha, apavada, vibhasha after that. But that's not necessarily always the case, and you will see why once we discuss this particular slide. But most of the cases, you will see this is the kind of structure that Panini Maharshi has put. The basic statement or the general statement first, and then the apavadas, nishedhas, vibhashas, niyamas, everything will be collected after that. Chandramouli Mahoday.
So does that mean there's actually a sequence in which these rules are apavadas and all are fired? You do apavada, utsarga, and then the general rule?
You do apavada, what do you mean? While writing Ashtadhyayi or while applying?
No. If I imagine this entire Ashtadhyayi as some kind of a verb or a pada, subantam or tingantam generator, in what sequence does a rule actually get fired? Do you first do apavada, then like a C case statement kind of? I'm just saying what you go through all the
first you will
apavada.
have an apavada fired, and then if apavada is fired, apavada will most likely block utsarga, so utsarga will not be fired. And if that apavada case statement doesn't match, then the default will be utsarga.
Okay.
That's how it works.
Okay.
Okay. So understand this particular, pay attention. Kutrachit ekam sutram dvayoho athva adhikanam sutranam milit Tritva apavada rupena karyam karoti. The diagram is more explanatory than the words. You have one utsarga which is yellow, you have another utsarga which is this whatever bluish color, and you see how the apavada is placed. Apavada is the small green circle which overlaps the combined region of the first and the second utsarga. So if you consider only two sutras at a time, if you only consider prathama utsarga and apavada, then it is not a strictly white and then gray inside white relationship. The apavada protrudes out. If you see the second sutram and the apavada, again it is not a strict gray inside white relationship. But when you take two sutras together, then the two sutras together, when their karya kshetras are added, those karya kshetras completely overlap the karya kshetram of apavada. Very subtle point, difficult to understand. We are going to see many examples to understand this particular aspect. Some of these examples are extremely familiar to you. You would say, we never thought that this kind of overlap would happen. But in such a case, even when the karya kshetram of two sutras together completely covers the apavada, the same definition is still applicable. Niravakashatvam apavadasya bijam. The apavada has become niravakasha. Niravakasha means no space for application. Avakashaha nasti. So no space for application in the context of the two karya kshetras together. So avakashaha nasti. Ataha apavadaha dvayoho utsargayoho ekatra rupena api svikartum shakyate. So yatra dvayoho sutrayoho ekatríkrutam karyakshetram, combined area of operation. Trutiyasya sutrasya karyakshetram samagra rupena vyapnoti. So the green circle is not covered by the yellow area or the purple area, but the green circle is covered by the combined yellow and purple area. So tritiyasya sutrasya karyakshetram एकत्रीकृतेन कार्यक्षेत्रेण व्याप्यते. तत्र तत् तृतीयं सूत्रम् अपि अपरयोः द्वयोः सूत्रयोः अपवादरूपेण अवश्यं स्वीक्रियते. And not just three, not just two, but you can see an example in Ashtadhyayi where you have three utsargas. So consider a triangle with, say, one vertex as one karya kshetra, other vertex as other karya kshetra, and third vertex as third karya kshetra, and an apavada that combines or which becomes niravakasha because of the three sutras together. So instead of a circle overlapping between two karya kshetras, I might be able to draw it over here. So a triangle like this. So this is one utsarga, this is other utsarga, this is third utsarga. So this say parallelogram. So this is one utsarga, other third, and then this is something like an apavada where it overlaps all the three and then it becomes niravakasha in place of all the three. Even for four, you can see some examples. So anytime an apavada becomes niravakasha in presence of multiple sutras together, then still that apavada will be called apavada. And let's take one example, very common, very well-known example, even for those who don't have studied Paniniya Vyakarana, know this particular example. Let's take this sutram Ikoyanachi. Ikoyanachi sutram says, Ikvarnasya achvarne pare yanadeshaha bhavati. So if there is an ikka letter and there is an acha letter, some yanadesha action is told. So the kshetra of Ikoyanachi is ikka plus acha. Ik plus acha. Ik varnasya achvarne pare. The next sutram is the sutram of guna sandhi. All of us know guna sandhi. Ad gunaha iti sutram asti. So as akarasya akarasya cha achvarne pare gunadeshaha bhavati. This is how the sutra is told. So the guna sandhi sutra, it may not be all the places where guna sandhi is applicable, but the way sutra is told is a or a plus acha. So observe, Ikoyanachi is Ika plus Acha. So that's your yellow circle or yellow square. Ad Gunaha is A and A plus Acha. There cannot be an overlap. So that's your purple square. Because Ika is E and others. A and A is not in Ika. So Ika plus Acha is one yellow square. A plus Acha is your purple square. And then what is this green thing? The green thing is the Savarna Dirgha Sandhi. Akas Savarne Dirgha, the Savarna Dirgha Sandhi, the Ashtadhyayi rule of Savarna Dirgha Sandhi says Akka plus Akka. The prerequisite, the kshetra of the Savarna Dirgha Sandhi is Akka plus Akka. Now observe carefully. Akka plus Akka is not directly subset of Ika plus Acha because Akka has the A component which is not in Ika. So Akka plus Akka is this green circle which protrudes outside the yellow square. Similarly, Akka plus Akka is not directly Akka, A or A plus Acha because there is this Acha component. There is this Acha component. No, there is this Akka component which can include E, U, and so on. Whereas here you have only A and A. So the purple square consists of only A and A. Akka has E, U, Ru components which protrudes outside that A and A. So Ikoyanachi and Akasavarne Dirgha just two is not the white-gray relationship. Adgunaha Akasavarne Dirgha just two is not the white-gray relationship. But when you consider Ikoyanachi and Adgunaha together, so you combine Ika plus Acha as one area and A or A plus Acha as another area, the combined area becomes Akka plus Acha. And now Akka plus Akka is a subset of Akka plus Acha. So the green circle is now the subset of the combined Ikoyanachi and Adgunaha. For example, so and in this particular way, one apavada can act as an apavada only when two sutras are combined together. Combined in the sense their karya kshetras are combined together. So the karya kshetras of two sutras are combined together and an in third sutram will be completely niravakasha. Niravakashatvam apavadasya bijam. So it becomes niravakasha because of the two sutras. There also you can consider this sutram as apavada. Any questions on this particular topic? Actually, let's move on. There are only 3 slides, but like really complex. So let's actually move on. Now, what happens is when you have these 3 sutras interacting like this, 2 of them are utsargas and 1 is apavada, and that apavada is also not necessarily apavada of 1, but it is apavada of combined. So when you have 1 apavada and 2 utsargas combined together, at that particular time, it is not as straightforward as saying that apavada will win over both the utsargas. Let me repeat this. When you have one utsarga and apavada, one utsarga and one apavada, the rule is almost very simple. Utsarga will be blocked by the apavada. Apavada wins, utsarga loses. But when you have one apavada combined with 2 utsargas, and that also not separate utsargas, but combined utsargas acting as the full area that is covered by that inside which the apavada lies. So yatra ekam sutram dvayoho utsargayoho ekatra apavada rupena karyam karoti tatra badhya badhaka bhavasya vishesha niyamaha santi. And these rules, 3 rules are there, and we are going to learn 3 rules, and then that's all for today's class. So 3 rules are there, and these 3 rules depend on where the apavada is placed in reference to the utsargas. So observe this. When you have 2 utsargas and 1 apavada, there are 3 possible ways in which the apavada can be placed. The apavada can be placed before the 2 utsargas. In the Ashtadhyayi order is what I am saying. Ashtadhyayi kramena, not Siddhanta Kaumudi or any other krama. Ashtadhyayi kramena, prarambhe apavadaha, tadanantaram dvau api utsargau. It need not be consecutive. There can be sutras in between. I am just saying you compare the Ashtadhyayi numbers of the 3 sutras. So if the apavada comes all the way before, that's one combination. Or the apavada can come between the 2 sutras, or the apavada can come all the way at the end of the 2 sutras. Simple mathematics tells us that there is no other way. When you have 2 utsargas and 1 apavada, And again, let me repeat this. I'll not repeat it again and again. For the one last time, it's an apavada of the combined space of the utsargas. So in such a case, apavada might appear before the two utsargas, apavada might appear between the two utsargas, or apavada might appear at the end of the utsargas. And I'm talking about, somebody's asking, I'm talking about the placement of sutras in Ashtadhyayi. Apavada sutram is, say, hypothetically, apavada sutram is, say, 7190. Utsarga 1 is 7198 and Utsarga 2 is 7104. So then Apavada has come first. Or Utsarga can be, say, 6240, 6250 and 6260. Then the Apavada 6250 is in the middle. Like that I am saying. So three possible cases are there. And in each case, when the Apavada wins and when the Utsarga wins is fixed by the rules of grammar. Understand this. The first situation where apavada is present all the way in the beginning, the rule says, and you have to remember these rules, these are very fundamental. There is a question in homeworks for these. The rule says, Purastad apavadaha anantaran vidhin badhante nottaran. In simple language, this rule means Purastad, the initial apavada, the apavada that is kept in the beginning, before the utsargas. When an apavada is kept before the utsargas, it will only block anantara, means the first utsarga. Purastad apavadaha इत्युक्ते ते अपवादाः ये प्रारंभे स्थापिताः सन्ति अष्टाध्यायी क्रमेण ते anantaran vidhin badhante means they will only affect the utsarga that is closest to them. Na uttaran. It will not block the utsarga that is farther. So understand, it is still apavada because apavada is niravakashatvam. But is apavada now blocking the utsarga? For utsarga 1 which is closer to apavada, it is blocking. For utsarga 2 which is not closer to apavada, it is not blocking. Purastad apavadaha anantara. Anantara is closer. Anantaran vidhin badhante na uttaran. Uttara is later ones. So purastad apavadaha anantaran vidhin badhante nottaran. So that's the rule when the apavada is all the way in the beginning. When the apavada is in the middle, now you should be able to understand this rule on your own. Madhye apavadaha purvan vidhin badhante nottaran. So apavada which is in the middle will block only the first utsarga which comes before it. It will not block the utsarga which comes after it. Madhye vidyamanaha apavadaha purvan vidhin badhante nottaran. And finally, when you have an apavada at the end, it will block all the utsargas before it. So the rule, there is no special rule. So we just say the rule of the badhakatva. Yena na prapte yo vidhirarabhyate. I have already explained this rule. Satasya badhako bhavati. So utsarga 1 will also get blocked by apavada. Utsarga 2 will also get blocked by apavada. Understand, it's quite complex, but this is extremely fundamental and you have to spend time on understanding this. And apavada, which is all the way in the beginning, will block only the next utsarga, the first utsarga. I mean, need not be immediate next sutram. The first utsarga that is there in the sequence. So purastad apavadaha anantaran vidhin badhante nottaran. The middle apavada will block the utsarga that comes before it. Madhye apavadaha purvan vidhin badhante nottaran. And the final, the last utsarga will block everything. So yena na prapte yo vidhirarabhyate. This actually not explaining that rule, is just the default rule. I mean, you don't need a default rule to say apavada blocks utsarga. You need the rule for the first and the second case because apavada is not blocking some utsarga. So a rule is required. For the third case, the apavada is automatically blocking all the utsargas, so a specific rule is not needed. So we take the general rule, yena na prapte yo vidhirarabhyate. That's the definition. Satasya badhako bhavati. So let's now take quick one example. Utsargayoho purvam sthitaha apavadaha. Purastad apavadaha anantaran vidhin badhante nottaran. Yaha apavadaha द्वयोः अपि उत्सर्गयोः पूर्वं स्थापितः अस्ति सः अपवादः केवलं प्रथमम् उत्सर्गं बाधते, अन्यान् उत्सर्गान् न बाधते. सेकेंड, थर्ड, फोर्थ, whatever are there, अन्यान् उत्सर्गान् न बाधते. So here are three sutras now. I'm not going to tell you which is, but obviously, I mean, you'll know that the first is the apavada. But let's read these sutras, very simple sutras, just pay attention. And I have specifically not given the sutra names because I don't want you to be confused. Just see the numbers. The first sutra says, Akaranta dhatavaha upasargena saha prayujyate chet ka iti pratyaya bhavati. So when you have an akaranta dhatu like da, and when you use it with the upasarga, you get a ka pratyaya. Forget about what is on the right side or everything. Akaranta dhatavaha upasargena saha prayujyate chet ka pratyaya. Then the next sutram, which is 5-6 sutras later, so 141, it says Akaranta dhatubhyah na iti pratyaya vidhyate. So for the Akaranta verbs, you get a na pratyaya. So obviously it is clear that it is now the general sutram, the previous is apavada. The next sutram says Sarvebhyah dhatubhyah upapadasya upasthitau anapratyaya vidhyate. Upapada is the special word that is used in upapada samasa. Like for example, you say sutrakaraha, so sutra is upapada. Kumbhakaraha, kumbha is upapada. Bhashyakaraha, bhashya is upapada. So that extra word that comes in that upapada samasa along with the dhatu is called upapada. So sarvebhyah dhatubhyah upapadasya upasthitau an iti pratyaya vidhyate. Now I will not go in the details, we are running short of time, but take my words for it, or you can work it out later on and we will discuss it maybe in the next week's class. But you can actually observe that when you combine the kshetra, the area of these two sutras, it completely blocks the previous sutram. Therefore, you have an apavada which is purastat and it is blocking the two utsarga. The example is directly quoted from Mahabhashyam. So definitely it's not wrong. If you are confused about something, think about it, take pen and paper and understand this. So the two utsargas together are going to make that apavada niravakasha, and therefore this apavada will only block the first utsarga, it will not block the second utsarga. What does it mean? If I have a particular construct called go plus sama plus da, don't worry about what is it. All that you understand is go is the upapada, sama is the upasarga, and da is the akaranta dhatu. Now in this particular case, all three sutras are applicable. Observe this. Akaranta dhatu bhya na iti pratyaya vidhyate. There is akaranta dhatu, so na pratyaya is applicable. Akaranta dhatavah upasargena sah prayujyate chet ka iti pratyaya. You have an akaranta dhatu, you have an upasarga, so you will get a ka pratyaya. And sarvebhyah dhatubhyah upapadasya upasthitau ana. So obviously there is a dhatu called da and there is an upapada called go, so you will get ana pratyaya. So all three are applicable. Praptihi asti. Now how does the conflict happen? When there is a fight between 31141 and 31136, 31136 wins because it is the apavada which will block the first utsarga. Now when the conflict between 31136 and 321 happens, the apavada has already blocked one utsarga, so now it will not block another utsarga that comes after it. So purastad apavadaha anantaran vidhin badhante na uttaran. So 31136 iti apavadaha, 31141 iti prathamam utsargam eva badhate, 321 iti dvitiyam utsargam na badhate, ataha go plus sama plus da ityatra utsargasya eva prayogaha bhavati, ana iti eva pratyayah tatra vidhiyate. In this way, purastad apavadaha kevalam anantaran vidhin badhante, uttaran na badhante. Similarly, we have the next example, madhye apavadaha purvan vidhin badhante, uttaran na badhante. A middle apavada will block the one utsarga that's before it. Let's see the example. So you have this particular sutram 31135. This sutram says ikaropada dhatu. Ikaropada means ikara is in the second last place. So for example, likh. Ikaropada dhatuhu asti chet tatra ka iti pratyaya bhavati. So ikaropada dhatuhu asti chet ka pratyaya. The middle sutram says upasargaha nasti chet lip iti dhatoho sh pratyaya. So lip is a very specific dhatu. It's not about any general dhatu. Very specific lipa dhatu. Lipa iti dhatoho sh pratyaya. So the lipa is ikaropadha. So for this lipa verb, you get a sh pratyaya. So clearly this is now an apavada. The third sutra is the same as the previous one, 321. Upapadena sah dhatu vidhiyate chet ana iti pratyaya tatra bhavati. So any dhatu with an upapada, you get an ana pratyaya. So again, take my words for it, or you can work out that this middle sutram acts as a combined apavada for the previous sutram and the next sutram. So madhye apavadaha. Now what happens in a conflicting situation? Let's take an example. Kudya plus lipa. Whatever is it, but kudya plus lipa ityatra kim bhavati. So see, there is an ikaropada dhatu lipa. So the first sutram is applicable. उपसर्गः नास्ति, उपसर्गस्य अनुपस्थितौ लिप इति धातुः अस्ति. So the second sutra is applicable. And कोऽपि धातुः उपपदेन सह प्रयुज्यते. There is an upapada used, so the third sutra is applicable. So all the three sutras are applicable. Now what happens? When the conflict happens, the fight between the first and the second sutram will make or will result in the winning of the second sutram, which is the apavada. That apavada has blocked the previous utsarga now. So madhye apavadaha purvan vidhin badhante. But this 31138, when it fights with 321, 321 cannot be blocked because na uttaran badhante. So 31138 iti apavadaha kevalam 31135 इति पूर्वम उत्सर्गम एव बाधते. 321 इति परम उत्सर्गम न बाधते. अतः कुड्य प्लस लिप इत्यत्र अण प्रत्ययः एव भवति. So I know what I have discussed is basically very complex, but understand that the madhye apavadaha and the purastad apavadaha rules play a very fundamental role in deciding what sutra is applied. So there is a question over here, will two sutras be applied? No, eventually only one sutra is applied. So the way it happens is that first there is a fight between 135 and 138. 138 wins, and then that 138 fights with 321. So when it's like round robin or whatever, I mean, when A wins over B, A fights with C, something like that. So when 31138 wins, it fights with 321. But now 31138 is apavada, which has already fought with and won over one utsarga. It will now not win the other utsarga. So madhye apavadaha purvan vidhin badhante nottaran. In this way, the middle apavadas will only block the previous utsarga and not the next utsarga. And finally, the last example, it's extremely simple. The same example, iko yanachi adgunaha and akassavrani dirghaha. I mentioned earlier, iko yanachi and adgunaha are the two utsargas. Akassavrani dirghaha is the apavada. And this apavada is strategically placed by Panini Maharshi after the two utsargas. So akassavrani dirgha will always block iko yanachi and adgunaha. So akassavrani dirgha iti apavadaha dvau api utsargau badhate. So iti plus iti. Observe now this. When you want to do iti plus iti, technically iko yanachi is applicable because the area of operation of iti plus iti lies inside iko yanachi. There is an ik letter and there is an ach letter. So ik plus ach. So iko yanachi is applicable, but iko yanachi is blocked over here by akassavrani dirgha. When you go to tada plus atra, technically that area overlaps with adgunaha because for adgunaha the area is a or a versus ach, a or a plus ach. So there is a over here and there is ach over here. So this area is still in the scope of adgunaha, but still akassavrani dirgha will block adgunaha. So in this way, an apavada which is strategically placed after the utsargas will block all the utsargas before it. सो येन ना प्राप्ते यो विधि आरभ्यते स तस्य बाधकौ भवति इत्युक्ते येन उत्सर्गेण अवश्यं प्राप्ते अपवादः आरभ्यते सः उत्सर्ग अपवादः तम उत्सर्गं बाधते. इन सिंपल लैंग्वेज उत्सर्गयोः अनन्तरं स्थापितः अपवादः सर्वान् अपि उत्सर्गान् बाधते. So in this way, we have this complex relationship between utsarga and apavada being worked out. When the apavada is present all the way before, it will only block the next utsarga. When the apavada is present in the middle, it will block the previous utsarga. And when the apavada is present all the way at the end, it will block all the utsargas. These are very fundamental concepts. While learning Laghu Siddhanta Bodhi, these are taught at some random point in time. But I think unless you understand this, you should not enter the study of even one sutram. So please spend, and today's class was especially more complex. Please, everybody of you, once this video is available, watch it once or twice. Take a notebook, draw these diagrams for yena na prapteyo vidhirarabhyate, for the madhya pavadaha and for the purasa pavadaha, and convince yourself that the two regions together will overlap on the middle region, that's the apavada. Let's quickly see the homework. So vakyam puri krutya ekam udaharanam likhata. So fulfill the statement and explain with the example. Purastad apavadaha, let me complete it for you. Purastad apavadaha anantaran vidhin badhante nottaran. Madhye apavadaha purvan vidhin badhante nottaram. Niravakashatvam apavadasya bijam. येन ना प्राप्ते यो विधिरारभ्यते सतस्य बाधको भवति. And व्याख्यानतो विशेष प्रतिपत्तिर्नहि संदेहाद लक्षणम. The reason why this is given over here is because which sutram is apavada and which is utsarga is sometimes so complex and it's not very evident that you need to look at vyakhyanas to understand these intrinsic details. The second question is all about playing around with the sutra patha and trying to find utsargas, apavadas, niyamas, nishedhas, vibhashas of the given sutra. So prathamayoho purva savarna ityase dvau nishedhau kau. So most of the cases, my own commentary will have the answers, and the commentary is written in simple Sanskrit. You should be able to pick the answers. If there is no commentary, you just look at the sutra patha, look at few sutras here and there, and you will see. So plus 5 sutras, minus 5 sutras, there will be a nakar over there, or there will be some other va, vibhasha, and so on. And that way you will be able to find the answer. The questions are actually simple, but these kind of questions will help you become more and more familiar with the sutra patha. So for example, ato gune iti sutrasya trayah utsargaha santi. As I mentioned, ato gune is an example which is a combined apavada of 3 sutras. So what are these 3 utsargas? Sarvanamnah smai iti sutram kasya apavada rupena pravartate. So try to find out these apavada utsarga relationship between the sutras. Today's class was actually very complex. It was kind of pinnacle over the final crest over this second module of Paniniya Praveshaha. So this is where we complete Paniniya Praveshaha, the second module. And now we have enough machinery built for entering the first sutram of Ashtadhyayi. So we completed 2 full modules, 20 classes. And now in the next class, in the 21st class, we will actually enter the Sutra Patha and we will start learning the sutras associated with Samnyas and Paribhashas. As I mentioned, Samnya Paribhasham is fundamental for the Ekavakyata. In the Ekavakyata, after doing the Samasa Vigraha and Padacheda and so on, bring Anuvrittis, Adhikaras and so on, and you have to bring in the meanings from the Samnyas and the Paribhashas. So that Samnya Paribhasham, we will take 10 classes and then we will start with the actual Prakriya of Sandhi, Subantas, Stris, Strikaraka, Vibhakti, Samasa, Tadhita, Tingantas, Krudantas. This Krudanta is where one of those typical Utsargapavada relationship we will learn. And finally, Sanadhyanta Dhatus and other topics. There is a question over here, Utsargapavada, how does it sync up with the Vipratishedha? So that's a good question. Let me spare a few minutes on that. Understand that as I mentioned at the beginning of the class, given any 2 sutras, say X and Y, what kind of relationship exists between X and Y? Is it Utsargapavada? Is it Antaranga Bahiranga? Is it Nityanitya? Is it Vipratishedha? Or is it Asiddha? You have to first find it out. Now you only know what is Utsarga Apavada by now. You don't know. I don't expect you to know what is Antaranga, Bahiranga, Nitya, Nitya, Vipratisheda, Asiddhatva and so on. But what happens if between the two sutras there is also Vipratishedhatvan and also Utsarga Apavadatu? Or maybe there is also Antaranga, Bahirangatvam and also Nitya, Nityatvam. So how does that plays out? So then when you have a conflict of this kind, where the relationship between two sutras can also be Utsarga Apavada and also be Antaranga Bahiranga, there are special rules designed, and these rules are actually the order in which I have written. So basically the rule is actually very simple. The rule says first check for Utsarga Apavada. If it is Utsarga Apavada, don't go ahead. If it is not Utsarga Apavada, check for Antaranga Bahiranga. If it is Antaranga Bahiranga, there will be rules for Antaranga Bahiranga. Apply them. If neither Utsarga Pavada nor Antaranga Bahiranga, then talk about Nitya Nitya. Then talk about Vipratishedha. Then talk about Asiddhatva. So follow the, try to decipher the relationship between the sutras in this sequence. Anytime you see a match, you stop there and you find the corresponding rules of that resolution. So you can say it's a book. Chapter 1 is Utsarga Pavada, Chapter 2 is Antaranga Bahiranga, Chapter 3 is Nitya Nitya, Chapter 3 is Vipratisheda, Chapter 5 is Asiddhatva. And you start reading the book, and when you get the answer in Chapter 1, stop there, don't go ahead. If you don't get any answer in Chapter 1, move to Chapter 2, read that, try to get the answer, and so on. So I think somebody asked the question which I just answered. Is there any order? So the order is exactly Utsarga Pavada first, then Antaranga Bahiranga, then Nitya Nitya, then Vipratisheda, then Asiddhatu. So given X and Y, it is not necessary that there is Utsarga Pavada relation. It is not necessary that there is Antaranga Bahiranga relation. One of these will always be there. The Shastra guarantees you that it will either be Utsarga Pavada or Antaranga Bahiranga or Nitya Nitya or Vipratisheda or Asiddhatu. There is no sixth entity, and all relationships will be captured in these five. All pairs of sutra will be captured in these five. So in the, or basically they are not interacting at all. So for example, if one sutra is a sutra in Tadhita Prakaranam and other is a sutra in the Krudanta Prakaranam, they will never act together. So all this resolution is for the sutras that simultaneously may act. So if you have one sutram that never acts along with other, then no relationship needs to be found out. But if you have two sutras that simultaneously could act together, then the relationship between the two is one of these five. And then if it is Utsarga Pavada, you use that, then Antaranga, Nitya Nitya, and so on. So I think I talked a lot of things today. One of the most complex classes of our course, probably the most complex class of our course till now, but it's very fundamental topic. So please make sure to watch this video once again. And if there are any questions, ask on the group, or you can ask in the next week. The plan for the next week is that on the first day, which is Thursday evening or Friday morning, if you're in India, I will go over Ashtadhyayi website and we'll just show some features. We might not need 1 full hour or so. It depends on the question answers. More questions you ask, more we will explore the website. So I'll basically prepare a few basic things and then discuss, and then I'll open it up for questions. So I'm going to discuss how to use some minor features of the website, which people usually don't know but are extremely useful. How to use filters, how to use search bar more effectively, and so on. So I'll discuss those on the Saturday's class, on the Thursday's class, or Friday for people from India. And then if you have any questions, we will take the second class for question answer sessions. Otherwise, I'll give it as an off class. And then in the week after that, we will start with module 3. There is a comment over here. All this circus is to do the Padasadhutva at the end. Sadly true. All this circus is only for Padasadhutva at the end. And it is because simple Padasadhutva, by listing words again and again and again, is not possible. So Indraha Adhyeta Varshas Divyam Varshasastram Yavat Adhyena Kala Nantanjagama. So this is the simplest way. It might look very complex, but it is, believe me, or believe Panini Maharshi, the simplest way to actually do the Shabda Sadhatu. Gita Bhagini.
Mahodaya, my question is one of the slides where you have said Niyama, Apavada and Pratishedha.
हाँ.
You gave
Yes,
the
sir.
examples, right? So, I mean, how will I know the very next sutra is whether apavada or like maybe, I mean, like I don't have any background, so I think the next sutra says something. It may be a rule.
Correct. So Vyakhyanato Vishesha Pratipattihi. You need to read the Vyakhyanas. I don't expect you to read the Vyakhyanas for the homework. None of the questions in the homework will require you to read the Vyakhyanas except for some simple Sanskrit commentary that I have written. So for example, I don't even call it Vyakhyana. So for example, if I say what is the difference between Gunasamya and Gunasandhi, it's a simple Sanskrit that you can read and you will be able to understand. Beyond that, I don't expect you to read anything. And specifically for homework questions, I have given questions in such a way that you will not need to read Vyakhyanas. But in general, to answer your question outside the homework or outside the today's class, Vyakhanato Vishesha Pratipattihi, you will get all answers from the Vyakhyanas. And that's why the commentaries and a guru who will tell you how to read the commentaries is the right path on the Shastra.
Dhanyawad, Mohoday.
Further questions? Prashnaha na santi chet samapayamaha. So most of the homeworks are graded. I think only homework number 6 for some people is not graded. I'll grade it, and then going ahead, I'll make sure that I'll grade the homework as soon as you submit it. So there is a question, would you say any tips to improve speaking skills? Please take up the question on the group. Not directly related to the course, but I think there are lots of fluent Sanskrit speakers on the group, more fluent than me mostly. So they will be able to guide you for sure. समापयामः. अष्टाध्यायी जगन्माता यस्य चित्तात् समुत्थिता वेदानामुपकाराय तस्मै पाणिनिये नमः. शब्दब्रह्म समाराध्य कृतवान् यो विलक्षणं सर्वाश्चर्यमिदं शास्त्रं तस्मै पाणिनिये नमः. येन धौता गिरः पुंसां विमलैः शब्दवारिभिः तमश्चाज्ञानजं भिन्नं तस्मै पाणिनिये नमः. धन्यवादः.